Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I have for you people another Cardfight Vanguard deck profile, and if you cannot tell what deck it is from these lovely sleeves and the fact that it's titled in the video, I'm doing a deck profile of Granblue. This is definitely my favourite deck. I have the most fun with this deck. It's surprisingly competitive for what it is, and it definitely makes my opponent work for their wins, although it doesn't always win, but I still have a damn good time using it. Bear in mind, this deck did start out life as another deck by a YouTuber, or someone on YouTube called Nightflux. I shall leave their... Nightflux or Nightflix? Let me double check. Nightflux! I was right the first time. I'll leave the link to their deck profile in the video below. So just bear in mind that it did start out as that. However, I've tweaked it some to just cater it to how I prefer to play and what cards I prefer to use. So we'll start off. This is our starter, Captain Nightkid, who looks great, and he is by far one of the better starters in Granblue, in my opinion. What he does is you counterblast one, move him into the soul, and look at 10 cards from the top of your deck and choose one of them and put it into the drop zone. And if you know Granblue, they need cards in the drop zone to do anything. Well, not anything, but they use the drop zone as a toolbox, so having certain cards in there works very well. You can use Peter the Ghosty. Let me just get a Peter up for you guys. You can use Peter the Ghosty. He works very well. What he does is counterblast 1, mill 2, put him into the soul, and draw a card. Which is nice because you're drawing a card, but random milling in this deck doesn't particularly work. So yeah, that's why I prefer Nightkid, because selective milling works better. So let's get on with the rest of the grade zeros. I have 4 heal triggers. Brick the Ghosty rather than Dr. Rouge, no particular reason, but Ghosties are cool. We need an archetype. We don't really, it'd be silly. Healing in this deck, I know it sounds stupid, but healing in this deck is useful, because if you have particular cards in the drop zone, not in the drop zone, in the damage zone that you want into the drop zone, healing those cards works, because it means you can get them back rather than just being in the discard pile. And that's why Granblue are fun. Next, 4 Night Spirits, who are vanilla critical triggers, although they serve a much greater purpose rather than being just vanilla critical triggers, which I shall explain later on in the video. Then we have 4 Rough Seas Banshee, so that's 8 criticals in total. She has the skill, on the rear guard you can move her into soul and draw a card, which is nice because it's a 1-for-1, or what I like to do with her, I like to just boost with her first, and then next turn then use her skill, then it's a +1 rather than a 1-for-1. But she's useful because drawing in this deck is very good. Next, we have 4 Haiti Stearman, a stand trigger. What he does is, when he's in the drop zone and you ride a grade 3 Vanguard, he comes out in the same column as the Vanguard, so you place him behind the Vanguard. It doesn't matter that he's a 3k. The fact that he's a 3k booster doesn't matter. He is fodder, basically. You can bring him out for free and then use him as fodder for something else, which I shall explain a bit more. You'll understand it a bit more when I go on to some more of the other cards in this deck. And next we have the most fabulous card in this deck, the best. He is the best. Chappie the Ghosty is just super. He annoys people and it's fun to use. What he does is, when he's placed on the Guardian Circle, as soon as he's placed on the Guardian Circle, search your deck for any Granblue card and put it into the drop zone. The only downside to this card is that you have to do it. So if you've already got all the fuel in your drop zone, then you have to do it if you guard with him. But use this card to search for cards to put into the damage zone. Even if you guard with it and your attack's going to hit anyway, it doesn't matter because he's serving his purpose. And I'll go over some targets for him once we've gotten through the rest of the cards. Onto the grade 1s. I have 2 perfect guards because shit's expensive. However, I have another one on the way. 3 in this deck is kind of ideal because you're thinning the deck enough as is, and I found even with 2 I almost always have them in hand because you thin the deck anyway from the grade 3s to grade 2s to grade 1s. You're mostly leaving defense cards in your hand and the deck. But yeah, perfect guards, not much else to say about them. 4 Samurai Spirits. Now here is where things get interesting and where stuff happens with Granblue. His skill is that when he's in the drop zone, you can counterblast 1, retire a Granblue rearguard, and call him out. So this is where Haiti Stearman comes into use. So he's in the drop zone. You call him out, you counterblast 1, retire him, and call out one of these guys. So you can turn a 3k rearguard into a 7k, which is useful because it also means you can rearrange your field some as well. Because I've been in situations with Link Joker where it's like, oh crap, I can't use this column because it's blocked. Oh well, I'll just counterblast 1, move it over to this column, and it works fine. So it can be a sort of counter to Link Joker and some other clans like that, but this is useful, very useful. Next, for Deadly Nightmare, who does the same thing as Samurai Spirit, except instead of a counterblast, it's a Soul Blast 2. Ways to fuel the soul with this deck are by using Banshee, and actually, yeah, that's probably about it. I used to have Baskirk in this deck, which soul charged at the beginning of the main phases, but I've recently taken him out for a better card, which you should definitely see, but you'll probably guess since BT13 has recently come out. Next, 2 Dancing Cutlass. When he's placed on the Vanguard, Soul Blast 2 and draw a card, which is useful because, as I say, drawing's useful in this deck. You can also get out cards from the Soul and put them in the drop zone, again, which you can probably bring back with other effects. He's also a grade 1, which means you can counterblast 1 and bring him out for a Night Mist, which you'll see in a second, or you can Soul Blast 2 and bring him out for a Deadly Spirit, which you'll also see in a second. That's it for the grade 1s. For the grade 2s, I have 3 Skeleton Demon World Knight. His skill, this is your ideal ride target basically. If you want to get to grade 2, he is what you want on. His skill is that when he's on the Vanguard, at the beginning of the ride phase, discard a card from your hand and superior ride Ice Prison Necromancer Cocytus from your drop zone. But you can't normal ride for the rest of that turn. But you can only do it if your opponent's grade 3. If your opponent isn't grade 3, you can't use that skill. But that doesn't really matter anyway, because if your opponent's stuck at grade 2, then it's still even, but having grade 3s is good. Next, 2 Ruin Shade. She is a fantastic card. I only run 2 because this deck mills and filters so much that I always seem to have these. Her skill is that you can put the top 2 cards of your deck into the damage zone, into the drop zone, sorry, and she gets plus 2k. I only really use this skill if I haven't drive checked. No, if I have drive check triggers, so I'm less likely to get them, and if I really just want to push a little bit more guard. Because other than that, I usually just keep her at 9k. Because if you have one of the 7ks behind her, it's a 16k. So you only really need to use it if your opponent is at cross ride. Next, 3 Captain Night Mists. His skill is like Samurai Spirit. No, yeah, Samurai Spirit. Where if he's in the drop zone, you can counterblast 1, retire a unit, and superior call him. Except it has to be a grade 1 or greater, and that's why Dancing Cutlass is useful, because you can use his skill and then just use him as fodder to bring out Captain Night Mist. His other skill, which isn't often used, is when he's on the Vanguard Circle and you have another copy in the drop zone, he becomes an 11k, but that's only during your turn. So it's nice just to hit those early numbers, but it's not often used, really. Especially since you want Skeleton Demon as your ideal ride target. Next, 4, and less for the grade 2s actually, Deadly Spirit. This is the grade 2 version of Deadly Nightmare, basically, where you Soul Blast 2, retire a grade 1 or greater, and superior call it, kind of like Night Mist. However, he and Deadly Nightmare also serve a greater purpose, very much like Samurai Spirit and Night Spirit, which I shall explain in just a moment because we're getting on to the grade 3s. Alright, first we have 2 Lord of the Seven Seas Night Mist, and thank God BT13 came out because this card is just absolutely lovely, it's great. We needed a break ride and they gave it to us and it is brilliant. What this happens is, when a grade 3 rides on top of this card, and you've got limit break, you can, Vanguard gets plus 10k, and you can superior call 2 rearguards from your drop zone, and they each get plus 5k, which is great. Problem is, at the end of the turn they get retired. That's not really a problem because you can bring it back from other means anyway the next turn. So yeah, very useful, and I shall explain some setups that you can do with him once I've gotten through the rest of his cards. 1. Ice Prison Necromancer Cocytus. This is the superior ride card that you can do with Skeleton Demon. So if he's in the drop zone, drop a card, superior ride him. His skill is when he's placed on the Vanguard Circle, you can Counterblast 2 and superior call anything, and there's no cost, it's just free. Just Counterblast 2, superior call. You don't have to retire anything else, which is nice. So you can bring back, say, a Ruin Shade or a Skeleton Demon or just anything you need, or even a Dancing Cutlass. So you can Counterblast 2, Soul Blast 2, and draw. Soul Blast 2 and draw a card. So that's a plus. Also, when you're on limit break, he gets plus 5,000 when he attacks. Next, Deadly Swordmaster. And this is where Deadly Spirit and Deadly Nightmare come to play. If he is in your drop zone, and you have a grade 2 or greater Vanguard, you can superior ride him by retiring a Deadly Nightmare and a Deadly Swordmaster from the rearguard circle. So if you're on grade 2, even if your opponent's on grade 1 or grade 0, just to spite them, you can get to turn 2, just ride your grade 2. This doesn't have to be during the ride phase, which is nice. So turn 2, retire Deadly Nightmare, Deadly Spirit, boom. You've got Twin Drive already. It's great. Similarly to that, Spirit Exceed, where this is where Night Spirit and Samurai Spirit come to play. It's the same thing as Deadly Swordmaster, except instead of retiring Samurai Spirit as Night Spirit, those two cards go into the Soul instead, which is nice because it fuels Soul for Deadly Spirit and Deadly Nightmare. Christ, I'm getting confused with all these cards. And also Cutlass. However, you ideally want to be riding, of the two of these, Swordmaster, because he's an 11k. And that 1k makes all the difference. Trust me, it does. Okay, some situations that you might find yourself into. If you're going first, you'll want to be riding... You'll want to be trying to settle people one of these two. Because Cocytus is only a... if you go second. Because if you're going second, your opponent's got the grade advantage, and they're going to get to grade 3 faster, and you're going to be able to ride him. However, if I've still been in situations where I've gone first and I've chosen to ride him, because I've not had the fuel for these two. So these are if you're going first, ride these two. Ideally, this one. This trumps Spirit Exceed so much. If you're going second, Cocytus, because it works better. Right, so now some ways of getting the cards you want into the drop zone. Captain Nightkid isn't my first choice. I usually just leave him on the rearguard for a while, and if I do get the fuel that I need in the drop zone, I will use him as retiring fodder for Deadly Nightmare or Samurai Spirit. But you can use him if you don't quite have the cards you need. Better cards to get the cards into the drop zone are Chappie the Ghosty. So first turn, if your opponent's attacking, just guard with him. It doesn't matter if it goes through or not, because this happens as soon as he's hit on the Guardian Circle, and you can just throw away one of these cards that you don't need, well, that you do need, that you want to ride, and place it there. Either way, if you end up guarding with him, other targets to put into the drop zone are Deadly Spirit, Captain Nightmist, Deadly Nightmare, Samurai Spirit, and even Dancing Cutlass, because if you end up riding Cocytus, then you can get him back and get a draw. Or even if you break ride, then you can get him back. He becomes a 10k booster then, and you get to draw. So those are ways of getting the cards into the drop zone as well as what cards you want. I'll talk about some different setups now. Say for example, this is a field you have. You have a grade 2 Vanguard, Deadly Spirit, and Deadly Nightmare. You have Deadly Swordmaster in the drop zone, sorry. A Haiti Stearman, and a Hella Samurai Spirit. If it's later on in the game, you'll probably have those in there anyway. What you can do is, you can, well, even if you've got a grade 1 Vanguard, just ride this, retire these two, and superior ride that. Haiti Stearman comes out, which you can then use to Candle Blast 1, retire him, and replace him with Samurai Spirit. However, even better than that, what you can do is, if you're on grade 2, ride Lord of the Seven Seas Nightmist, and if you're on Limit Break, you can then retire these two and Superior Ride that and Break Ride that turn. So this gets plus 10k, so it's 21. Also, using his skill, the Break Ride skill, you can bring these two back, and this column gets plus 10k. Also, that comes out for retirement fodder. So this is attacking for 26, and if you Counterblast 1 retire to bring out Samurai Spirit, this is going to be attacking for 28. So that's nice. It's very nice. Anything can be here really if you want to, if your field's full. But that's one situation you can do. At the end of a turn, obviously these retire, but you'll probably have the soul to be able to bring him back next turn. You can, of course, also do a similar thing with Spirit Exceed, where you've got Knight Spirit and Samurai Spirit, and if you ride that turn to grade 2, then you can move these into the soul and Superior Ride Spirit Exceed. And then the same thing, exactly the same thing with Daily Swordmaster. You can use the Break Ride with it. However, this time, since the cards have gone into the soul, you can't bring back the cards you used to Superior Ride. But if these are in your soul in the drop zone anyway, you might as well Superior Call those. I think that is pretty much it for the deck. As I said, it's very fun to use. It's actually relatively cheap to make, especially if you're going with Night Flux's original deck profile. That's very cheap. I think he said it was about $20, and I think, it cost me a very similar thing just for his deck. So it's not expensive to make, especially not this one. It's surprisingly competitive. It's very fun to play, so much fun, very much shenanigans, lots of stuff going on. And however, because BT13 has recently come out, I'm going to be turning this into a Cocytus reverse deck at some point, which I will do a deck profile of, and depending on whether or not I prefer it, I will keep it or not. But either way, expect a deck profile for Cocytus reverse deck, which should be coming soon. And thank you very much for watching. Leave your comments in the comment section below, and I will see you next time. Bye.